What's up everybody? Back at it again with another Magnum Quest video, and in this one I'm going to be discussing my top 5 heroes to use in each faction dungeon that's helped me out on all of my accounts for progression while giving some tips and tricks. Let's get it. First up we have the Forest faction dungeon. A quick overview here is I think this is the easiest in terms of CC, meaning crowd control potential. There's a lot of support heroes you can use to lock down the enemies or buff your heroes. For example purposes, I'm going to be using my second account while showcasing some of the more popular floors that give you those dragon scales and XP. First floor up we have is 125. Now keep in mind I do idle a lot on these other accounts, so I'm typically always going to be over leveled compared to others, well at least for most of the time. My top 5 heroes for Forest would be Osishi, Fair, Cyan, Ion, and then Phi. Backup heroes would be like Amelia and Alowin. Personally, I've never utilized on any of my accounts Monroe or Fabian. Basically, my reasoning is one tank being Fair is more than enough for Forest, and I feel he provides much more than Monroe does. And then Fabian, well, he just dies way too fast. For Ascension priority, it's going to be Phi, then Cyan, then Ion. If I didn't get a lot of Cyan copies starting out on my account, I probably would have went with Phi and then Ion. Just remember, this all depends on what Ascension stars on your heroes that you're working with. This is a pretty standard setup for me. I keep Osishi and Fair in the front. Osishi, since she can blink away and then stun the enemy frontliners, which then shift the enemy's focus to Fair. And then Fair for tanking capabilities, the pull and attack debuff that he does, and also to keep that distance from the enemies, and then my backline. Backline I go with Cyan for the DPS, however there are times that I do place him in the front. I like to place him opposite the enemy I want him to jump on, do damage, and then potentially kill or at least take off the battlefield with his ultimate. Ion for revival and the ultimate entangle effect, and then Phi for that haste and energy buff at the beginning, plus his damage. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. However, I do find in this faction dungeon, I tend to put a lot of my heroes on manual, just so that I can chain CC, meaning chain crowd control, whether that's with Osishi and then Phi with his ultimate knockback, or Cyan with his ultimate, Ion with her ultimate. There's just a lot of heroes that I don't want to overlap the CC, and instead I want to use one right after the other. Next floor up is going to be 140. Now I do have 2 300s. Keep in mind I do reset my heroes a lot when I'm pushing to make things a lot easier for myself, and then I can make those heroes the highest available level I can, so in this case Cyan 300. He's not my usual 300 in my squad. Once again, I'm most likely over leveled here. Cyan would be the hero that I swap out for those backup heroes I mentioned, like Amelia, or if I had Alowin probably, but I fed her copies. I never used her. I know there's an occupational system now, but it is what it is. I can always get her again, and progress to me is more important. It's a rough life as free to play. You got to make decisions. So the problem with this setup, like I said, I find myself manualing a lot to chain CC. I mean, I could leave them on auto, but then that may require 10 times more, 20 times more, 30 times more of a retry factor. A side note is I don't even have my Cyan star mapped. My Phi is done bronze, and my Cyan still keeps up with damage, and that's because Phi needs a crap load of investment, levels, ascensions, star map, etc. So you won't really see him shine until way down the road in late game. And finally here, Forest 145. I'm still rocking those 2 300s, but I could have reset again to make Ion 300 as well, if I needed to. I had a bit of issues with this stage, mainly due to not timing my CC correctly with my heroes. And then a magical moment happened. I used those dragon scales and finally got my Sir to legendary. Let's go. This is pretty huge. The stats boost is huge. For reference, I've been playing this account for almost 3 months now as a free-to-play, minus spending $1 for the Ares top-up deal. So I have gotten some insane Sir luck. I think I've gotten 2 from friendship summons, 1 from gold soul dice. It's just been out of control on this account. I've had to spend so much on my main account to get my Sir to this point. Now next up we have the Fortress faction dungeon. A quick overview. Honestly, this is my favorite one simply because you have a lot of variety here to work with. In terms of how you push the content. You can either go with Fang DPS carry or a Winden DPS carry. Maybe Ekra instead would work, but it's just depending on your ascension levels and how you've invested. So the first floor up here is going to be 140. Unfortunately, I failed hard here and deleted some of the previous footage for like floors 125, 135, etc. Yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes, or most of the time. My top 5 heroes here for Fortress is a bit different because I actually run 2 setups depending on the enemy stage. The first setup would be Fang, Arthur, Cinia, Lillian, and Ilya. The second setup would be Fang or Ilya, then Arthur, Wyndon, Cinia, and Ekra. Personally, the heroes I've never utilized would be Oric, Bill, and Flan. The reasoning, well, they're just low on my priority list for Ascensions compared to the others, and I find they don't synergize as well with the 2 setups I mentioned. Ascension priority for me was Wyndon, Fang, and then Arthur. So jumping in here, this is my first setup I run with. How this setup works is I have either Ilya, Arthur in the front, or Arthur, Fang. It really all depends on the enemy setup. I could, if needed, reset my heroes again and make my Arthur 300 if I find his survivability to be an issue, which is what I think I did moving forward. If I have Ilya in the back, he's in either corner pocket, opposite the one where I want him to charge and cause disruption. Then I have Cinia in the other corner pocket with Lillian in the middle. The reason is very similar to the Wyndon pushing setup I showed a long time ago or referenced from time to time. So when Fang walks up forward, Cinia, when using her ultimate, the only hero in that radius is going to be Lillian, so she's going to get all that energy, allowing to basically spam her ultimate. The other setup I do would be Ilya Arthur in the front or Fang Arthur. Once again, it depends on the enemy setup. Then I have Ekra, Cinia, Wyndon. This backline brings a world of hurt as Wyndon's ultimate is nuts here, and he's also buffing Ekra. This setup was actually quite annoying due to both those Oshishis. My Fang was always getting confined. So as you can see here, my Cinia is just popping off energy to my Lillian. She's the only one in the radius. I also found it's easier to manual Arthur's ultimate here to time it so when Fang comes out of the confinement, he also gets the shield. Fang's damage is just going berserk right now. It's pretty much a wrap. As you can see, you really don't need high ascensions on Lillian, Ilya, or Cinia. It's mostly about Fang for the damage and then Arthur for survivability to utilize his shields and heals. Jumping ahead to floor 145, I just couldn't seem to do this. Maybe with a crap load of retries I could, but versing a Durla kind of sucks when you don't have the CC that Forest faction heroes have. So in this example, if my Fang doesn't jump to Durla and basically one-shots her before her ultimate, it's usually a wipe. I ended up resetting my heroes and brought my Arthur to 300, and then this was easier, of course. He was able to survive and use his shields and heals, and then dropping Ilya for Wyndon just because my Ilya is only 1 star, so he just wasn't doing very much while my Wyndon is legendary +1. Next up, we have the Wild Faction Dungeon, and a quick overview is definitely not the most interesting, and a lot of this has to do with the lack of options and ways to deal with specific enemies like Fair. Meaning, for example, Forest has Cyan, 5 speed plus Fair allows you to get the pull off first. Fortress has Ilya for charge and Cinia to block the pull. Wild doesn't really have those kind of heroes. I mean, it does. You do have Gilla, but I personally wouldn't invest into Gilla. But maybe throw her in situationally, but mine just dies too fast. First up, we have is floor 138. The reason why I wanted to show this one is because it has a double enemy Fair. My top 5 heroes for Wild would be Ares, Harry, Rickers, Issy, and Naomi. Personally, the ones I've never utilized would be Manton, Gilla, Hista, and Xander. My reasoning is simply they die too fast or their damage is obsolete. Ares plus Issy does what you need. My Ascension priority here was Ares, then Harry, and then Issy. So I wanted to show this stage because I find if your combat power allows it for the stages versing those enemy Fairs or Fair, I run with 4 heroes set up like this. I have Ares in the front and then I run 3 in the back. I keep Naomi in the corner pocket opposite Ares to avoid the Fair pull, as well as Issy in the middle, but sometimes she does get pulled. Basically my 2 squishy heroes. Due to my Rickers being low Ascension star, these heroes are the best chance I have at meeting the combat power requirement. I leave 1 frontliner spot empty so that those 2 Fairs both walk up and change direction to Ares. Basically, it's so that all the enemies group up on Ares so that when he uses his ultimate, he hits multiple targets much easier than if they were all spread out. As you can see here, the only heroes near the Fairs is Harry and Ares. This allows my backline to be safe, making this stage much easier because if I didn't do this, my Naomi and Issy would just be pulled in, and then the enemy Gaia would be hitting them instead of only Ares and Harry. Then moving over to floor 140, so look here, it's another double enemy fair. Plus it also has 2 Gila and then an Oshishi. I really do feel Wild Dungeon gets a lot of ridiculous setups, and due to the hero pool in that faction, just have an extremely hard time with it. Once again, I'm going back to that 4-man setup. It has a lot to do with your Ares ultimate timing. With a good rune, this would be much easier, but my runes are garbage. So you can see here, everyone's deleted except Ares. Now Ares can do what Ares does best, and be annoying with his infinite loop of ultimates, CC immunity, magic immunity. Everyone is surrounding him and he just deletes everyone. It's pretty busted. Here's just a quick look at what I would consider my 5-man setup. How it works is Rickers being the wall he tanks the damage and does all his stuns, buying time for Harry to get his ultimate off. Issy and Naomi are safe in the back for the most part, dropping AoE damage, heals, all that good stuff. But yeah, it's still the Ares show. Just remember, Rickers doesn't need a lot of Ascension stars to be tanky. He can work with low ones and still survive quite well. And then finally, we have the Shadow Faction Dungeon. Very similar style to the Wild in regards to it's the Ares show. Well, here it's the Durla show. Probably the most boring one out of them all in my opinion. The first floor up we have is 135. Now in this setup, you're going to see I use Julian, but the only reason why is my runes, like I mentioned, are garbage. So my Durla takes forever to build up to her ultimate. I need all the help I can get to stall the fight, so he's just a damage sponge alongside Alden. My top 5 heroes for Shadow would be Durla, Dracula, Alden, Mariella. I don't use her as often yet due to my Alden being so weak, and then Sorsha. Backup heroes would be like Julian and Vieira. Personally, the ones I've never utilized would be Gus and Carlotta. My reasoning is they're very low on the priority list for Ascensions compared to the others, and Durla is my main focus and they don't help support her. Ascension priority for me was Durla, Dracula, and then Alden. So I have a couple variations to this. The first variation would be like what you see here. You put both Julian and Alden in the front and then Dracula in the back. The first reason for this is my Dracula is decently ascended and star map invested, so he does good damage. I don't want him dying at the beginning because he's getting focused. The second reason is Julian and Alden have a lot of annoying survivability traits like resurrections, immunity to physical damage, etc. The other variation would be Alden Dracula in the front. However, there's a lot of RNG randomness in terms of where Alden gets teleported, and sometimes he just dies too fast to utilize his ultimate. Sorsha is in the back, and you want to position her opposite the enemy. You want to get a quick stun off at the beginning of the fight, plus apply the weaken effect, meaning they do less damage. So in this stage, it would be Durla. This stage is very annoying because you're trying to have your Alden teleported on top of or at least near Durla. So when he uses his ultimate, he freezes her to hopefully cancel her ultimate animation. So I didn't restart the fight here, even though Julian was chosen to be teleported, because I found it didn't really matter. My Alden just wasn't staying alive long enough to really be useful. I got super lucky here, and the stars aligned, and just as the enemy Durla was going into her ultimate skill animation, my Dracula used his ultimate, which silenced her, and then canceled it. Basically, if you can cancel her ult, it's most likely a win. And then it's just a matter of finishing off the rest. Next floor is going to be 140, and this is where I used that other frontliner variation, meaning instead of Julian Alden, I did Alden Dracula. The reasoning behind this is just they weren't tanky enough. Those two, I forgot the enemy's name, but those two bugs seen here, they just hurt. I chose to put Sorsha opposite Oshishi because I wanted to buy the time to avoid her confine effect, which I know is going to be placed on my Durla, meaning she can't gain energy. She already has a hard enough time doing this. Once Durla gets one ultimate off, as usual, the fight starts to shift heavily in your focus. So you can see Julian and Alden did what I needed them to do, just be basically damage sponges to take the focus off my Durla. Having Julian in the back instead of the front basically allowed Alden to be the first priority, then Dracula, and then Julian, so it's kind of like a chain reaction of sacrifices, so Durla could get another ultimate off. Hopefully this helps out anyone having trouble understanding what heroes they should be looking to use for faction dungeons, typically how to set them up if you're using the ones I do, and then the priority I also focus on. It is influenced heavily on luck, meaning how your summons went. It's going to determine what heroes you have ascended over others, resetting heroes a lot to make the faction you're working on stronger, stuff like that. Comment down below if you utilize different heroes and setups instead of the ones I mentioned. As always, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It's very close to the holiday update. Subscribe for future videos and stay tuned for the next one.